Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Maha-Bharata, Part 1, Chapter 6. The Kaurava's hatred grows. It was now time for the princes to leave Drona's school. To complete their teaching, they had to pay their guru's fees by offering him dakshina. Traditionally, dakshina was determined by the guru himself. So Drona assembled all the princes and said, "There is only one thing I want. You should take King Drupada prisoner, then bring him before me as your captive." The princes replied that they would certainly execute the order of their guru. They knew of their guru's enmity with the king. Drupada and Drona had lived together as children under the rishi Agnivesha. Drupada had promised that when he inherited his kingdom, he would bestow half of it on his dear friend Drona. Later, when they had both grown to maturity, Drona went to Drupada, reminding him of their friendship and the promise. Seeing the poor Drona standing before him, Drupada had said, "O luckless Brahmana, how do you consider me as your friend now? Past friendships are meaningless. Why, only equals can be friends. I am now a great king, and you are but an indigent, impoverished Brahmana. So do not try to invoke a long-dead relationship." Drupada had laughed at Drona and offered him a little charity. Feeling deeply insulted, Drona left Panchal, Drupada's vast kingdom, but his mind became fixed upon revenge. And now the time for that revenge had finally arrived. Drona looked about at his accomplished students and knew that Drupada would soon be regretting his arrogance. The princes mounted their chariots and sped towards Panchala. Accompanied by a large force of horsemen, They soon arrived at Drupada's capital, Kampilya. Duryodhan and his brothers vied with one another to lead the attack. They rushed toward the city gates with their weapons raised. Sending up cries, they burst into Kampilya along its main highway, while the terrified citizens hid in their houses. Meanwhile, outside the city, Drona waited with the Pandavas. Arjuna had suggested to his brothers that they not accompany the Kauravas. They will not be able to overpower the mighty Drupada, so we should make our attack after theirs has been repulsed. Drupada heard the attacking Kauravas crashing through his city, and so he came straight out of the palace, mounted on his huge white chariot. Roaring with joy at the chance for battle, Drupada charged at the head of his army to defend the city. Drupada showered his enemies with forceful arrows. Drupada's speed and lightness of motion were such that the Kauravas thought they were facing many Drupadas. Indeed, Drupada careered and moved fearlessly in his chariot, entering into their midst, his bow constantly drawn to a circle, and his searing shafts flying in all directions. The Panchalas sounded thousands of conchels, trumpets, and drums, creating a noise which sounded like the roar of a tremendous lion. Drupada struck the Kuru princes with his arrows and sent them reeling. Seeing their king in the forefront of the battle, the citizens then came out of their houses to hurl clubs, maces, and other missiles at the Kurus. The Kuru princes were surrounded by thousands of assailants, and so they felt oppressed and overwhelmed. The Kauravas fled howling from the city, with the Panchalas in pursuit. The Pandavas laughed. Arjuna said scornfully to Yudhisthira, "Here come the proud Kauravas, put to flight by Drupada. They are strong in words only. So now it is time for us to fight. My dear brother, you stay here. I shall go with the others." So Yudhisthira remained behind with Drona Acharya, while his 4 brothers flew toward Kampilya. Bhima bounded along with mace held aloft, while Arjuna raced behind him on a chariot with his 2 other brothers, Nakula and Sahadev, on either side. But the Panchalas were waiting for them and had blocked the city gates with a row of elephants. However, Bhima struck at the elephants with his club. With their heads smashed, covered in blood, the elephants fell to the ground just like cliffs broken off by thunderbolts. Bhima spun like a furious tornado amid the Panchala warriors. Elephants, chariots, and infantrymen fell in the thousands. The Pandavas drove the hostile force back just as a herdsman drives cattle. Keen to please his preceptor, Arjuna released volleys of arrows at the immense Panchala forces. Arjuna's straight flying shafts came in an endless stream and sped unerringly straight at the enemy warriors. Arjuna resembled the all-devouring fire which appears at the end of the millennium. Protected on either side by Nakula and Sahadev, Arjuna cut down thousands of fighters. Drupada raced to the head of his troops, and they rallied with lion-like roars. Led by their king, they mounted a powerful counterattack against the Pandavas. Arrows, darts, spears, and clubs rained down on the 4 brothers. Arjuna repelled all their missiles with his arrows. The Panchalas enraged Arjuna with their furious attack and fought with redoubled energy. Arjuna's foes could not mark any interval between his pulling an arrow from his quiver and bending his bow to fire it. All they saw was a constant stream of shafts speeding towards them. The mighty Panchala warriors shouted praises at Arjuna for his prowess. Along with his commander-in-chief, Satyajit, Drupada personally rushed toward Arjuna. Like the king, Satyajit was a warrior capable of contending with thousands of other warriors at once. Satyajit struck Arjuna with 100 fierce arrows and then sent up a great roar. Not tolerating the attack, Arjuna pierced Satyajit with 10 arrows and simultaneously cut his bow to pieces with 3 more shafts. Seeing this wonderful feat, the other warriors cheered. Satyajit then grasped another bow and immediately pierced Arjuna's horses as well as his charioteer. But Arjuna once again split Satyajit's bow, then killed his horses and smashed his chariot to pieces. Quickly, Drupada came to the assistance of his commander. A powerful exchange of arrows and other missiles followed between the king and Arjuna. Gradually, Arjuna overpowered Drupada. Arjuna shattered the king's bow, tore off his armor, struck down his flagstaff, and killed his horses. Seeing Drupada confounded, Arjuna threw down his own bow and took up a huge scimitar curved sword. Arjuna leaped down from his chariot and jumped onto Drupada's chariot, seizing him and holding the sword to his throat. Meanwhile, Bhima had been wreaking havoc among Drupada's troops. Arjuna then shouted to him to withdraw, for they had achieved their aim and had captured Drupada. The troops saw their king's plight and fled in fear. Arjuna then dragged Drupada onto his own chariot and rode back toward Drona Acharya. And when Drona saw the captive king, he smiled. "So, O mighty king, do you now desire to revive our old friendship? It seems that your kingdom and wealth have now become mine." Drupada squirmed and blushed. He looked down as Drona continued speaking. "You need not fear for your life, Drupada, for I am a Brahmana, and it is my duty to be ever forgiving. Indeed, I have always cherished an affection for you since we were children." Drona then ordered Arjuna to release Drupada. The king listened in silence as Drona continued speaking. "I still desire your friendship, Drupada, but tell me, how can one who is not a king be a friend of a king? Therefore, I have decided to allow you to keep half of your kingdom, and I shall take the other half." Drona then ordered Arjuna to release Drupada. The king listened in silence as Drona continued speaking. Drupada was in no position to argue. He knew that Drona's martial power far exceeded his own, especially as he now had the mighty Kurus as his disciples. There would be no question of defeating him in battle. Summoning all of his patience, Drupada nodded in assent. "O Drona, truly you are a noble soul to act in this way, for great personalities like yourself are always magnanimous, and I too desire your friendship. So let us live peacefully, each ruling his own half of the Panchala kingdom. Drupada then had Brahmanas perform appropriate rituals and bestowed the northern half of the kingdom upon Drona, who then left with the Pandavas for Hastinapur. But Drupada burned with humiliation. Somehow or the other, he must avenge his honor. Absorbed in such thought, the king returned to his palace. As they returned to Hastinapur, Drona rode on Arjuna's chariot, speaking to him affectionately. Drona loved this prince as dearly as his own son, and Drona knew there was nothing Arjuna would not do for him. Confidentially, Drona said to Arjuna, "O hero, you are now the best of all bowmen within this world. Although you have repaid me by defeating Drupada, I still will ask one more thing from you as dakshina. When the time comes, you must fight with me when I come to fight with you." Arjuna was surprised. How could he ever fight with his teacher? Still, Arjuna replied without hesitation, "Yes, my Guru Dev, it shall be so, for I am always your servant." Part 2. Meanwhile, the Kurus had heard of a most wonderful occurrence in Mathura, the city where Kunti had been born. Kunti had a brother named Vasudeva, who had been imprisoned by the wicked king Kamsa. This powerful monarch had been viciously terrorizing Brahmanas and other kings. Hearing of a divine prophecy that Vasudeva's 8th child would kill him, Kamsa imprisoned both Vasudeva and his wife Devaki. Kamsa then killed their first 6 children at birth. But somehow, despite Kamsa's vigilance, the 7th and 8th children, named Balaram and Krishna, had escaped death. By some mystical arrangement, Krishna had been carried away from Mathura and raised in Vrindavan, a small village of cowherders, by its leader Nanda. The great rishis said that Krishna was in fact the Supreme Lord himself, and that it had been his own divine arrangement that he had gone to Vrindavan from Mathura. The Kurus were amazed to hear from the sages that God himself had appeared in the neighboring kingdom of the Yadus. When he became a youth, Krishna returned to Mathura and killed Kamsa with his bare hands. This tremendous deed astonished all those who saw it, confirming for them Krishna's divine identity. For Kamsa had struck fear even into the hearts of the demigods. There had been no earthly king capable of standing against Kamsa. But this young Krishna, still only a boy, along with his brother Balaram, who was 1 year older, had overpowered Kamsa's troops and generals, finally killing the king along with his evil ministers. The 2 transcendental brothers then became chiefs of the Yadu dynasty. They maintained a friendship with the Kurus in Hastinapur, taking special interest in the welfare of their aunt Kunti and her 5 fatherless sons, the Pandavas. The rishis also said that Balaram was a manifestation of the Supreme Godhead. He became famous as a peerless, unrivaled mace fighter. Upon the request of Drona Acharya, Balaram agreed to train both Bhima and Duryodhana in the skills of handling the mace. Thus, Balaram spent time in Hastinapur. And while there, Balaram learned of the fierce rivalry and envy the Kauravas felt toward their Pandava cousins. And when Krishna heard of this, he became concerned for Kunti and her sons. Therefore Krishna asked one of his advisors, Akrura, to visit Hastinapur and assess the situation, and to see if Krishna could be of any help. The Kurus received Akrura in friendship. Kunti was overjoyed to see Akrura. She inquired about her kinsmen and friends in Mathura. Especially Kunti wanted to know everything about Krishna, whom she accepted as the supreme God. She asked Akrura, "Does my nephew Krishna think of me and my sons? Does Krishna know how I am suffering in the midst of my enemies, just like a doe in the midst of wolves?" Akrura asked Kunti to tell him more about the situation in the city, and Kunti began explaining everything. She knew that Duryodhana and his brothers were always intriguing against her sons. The Kauravas could not tolerate the superior prowess of the Pandavas. The humiliation they had recently received at Kampilya had made them even more keen to dispose of Pandu's sons. Kunti spoke to Akrura with tears in her eyes. "So, will Krishna come here to console me? I always pray to that all-powerful protector of the universe. Indeed, I see no other shelter for myself or my sons." Kunti cried out to Krishna in front of Akrura. Akrura gently reassured her that Krishna was often speaking about her and had actually sent him to analyze the situation. Both Akrura and Vidura comforted Kunti, reminding her about her son's extraordinary birth. The Pandava boys were expansions of the gods, and there was no way that the evil Kaurava princes could ever overcome them. Akrura remained in Hastinapur for several months. Then, when he felt he had understood the situation fully, Akrura decided that it was time to return to Mathura. But before leaving, Akrura met with Dhritarashtra in order to offer some advice. Ultimately, the blind king himself was responsible for his son's acts, and he could certainly check their behavior if he so chose to do so. Akrura said, "My dear king, you have obtained the throne only because your brother Pandu passed away prematurely. Therefore, Pandu's sons have the first claim on the throne. So you should not discriminate against them in favor of your own sons. You should keep in mind always that you must rule the kingdom strictly according to moral principles. You should treat all of your subjects equally. What to speak of the Pandavas, who are your own nephews, and they are heirs to the throne. Your over-attachment to your own relatives is simply born of ignorance. Every creature in this world is born alone and dies alone. Everyone experiences the results of his or her own good and evil deeds, and in the end, leaves the present body to accept another. The belief that one person is the relation of another is nothing more than illusion." Dhritarashtra listened in silence as Akrura spoke. Dhritarashtra understood the implications of his words. Akrura had made it very clear that the Pandavas' cause was righteous, and that by opposing them, Dhritarashtra would reap only grief. Dhritarashtra bowed his head as Akrura concluded. By favoring your own sons, O Lord of the earth, you are only acting out of ignorance. How then can you hope for any good result? Ignorance always leads to sorrow. Therefore, act virtuously and deal with Pandu's sons as they rightfully deserve. O wise one, your words are like the immortal nectar of the gods. Why, I could go on hearing them forever. O Akrura, surely you have spoken the truth. But just as a person on the verge of death cannot be saved even by drinking nectar, so too your instructions do not stay in my heart. Dhritarashtra admitted he was prejudiced by affection for his own sons. He told Akrura that he felt helpless to overcome that affection. Like Kunti, the king also understood Krishna's position. Yes, surely everything moves according to the will of the Supreme Lord, and no man can influence the Lord's supreme will. So now Krishna has appeared just to relieve the earth's burden, and that will most definitely happen. But what can I do? After all, destiny is all-powerful. Dhritarashtra had heard the sages describe how Krishna's mission was to destroy the large number of demoniac kings who had begun to populate the earth. Pandu had managed to check them, but since his retirement, the demons had formed alliances and had built huge armies, thus posing a constant threat to world security. By now, Akrura could understand that Dhritarashtra was set upon a course that would lead to his ruination. For by favoring his own sons over the Pandavas, the king would ultimately ignite a conflict between them, which would result only in the destruction of the entire Kuru race. Akrura felt there was nothing more he could do. Dhritarashtra refused to accept responsibility for his actions. So now, taking leave from the king, Akrura made his way back to Mathura. After he was gone, Dhritarashtra pondered Akrura's words. It was true that Pandu's sons were the rightful heirs to the kingdom. That could not be denied. It was especially clear that the eldest of them, Yudhishthir, was most qualified to be king. Dhritarashtra had seen how the prince was noted for his honesty, patience, kindness, and unswerving adherence to duty. Along with his brothers, Yudhishthir was a firm favorite of the people. Previously, the citizens had loved Pandu, and so it seemed to them that he had now returned to live among them in the form of his sons. Everywhere people were speaking of their desire to see Yudhishthir installed as king. Dhritarashtra had heard of their talks. Oh, now we have a qualified prince. Why should the blind Dhritarashtra remain king? We should place the pious Yudhishthir on the throne. Certainly he will be a righteous and benevolent ruler. Dhritarashtra then consulted with Bhishma, Vidura, and Brahmanas. They all decided that Yudhishthir should be installed as Prince Regent. The ceremony was soon performed, and the people rejoiced. Part 3. Meanwhile, Duryodhana was seething. How could his father have overpassed him and instead made Yudhishthir Prince Regent? When Bhima sneered at Duryodhana's distress, that made it even more unbearable. Duryodhana then went with Karna and Dushashan to discuss with Shakuni a way to eradicate the Pandavas. Shakuni's eyes narrowed as Duryodhana and the others vented their rage. Shakuni pressed his fingertips together to think, and then spoke. It seems to me the only remedy is to get the Pandavas out of Hastinapur to a place where they can be killed without any interference. Somehow or other we should contrive to have them burned to death, but make it seem like an accident. Duryodhana smiled, but Karna was not so sure. Karna did not like Shakuni's devious ways. Only cowards resort to deceit and underhanded methods. Powerful men favor open combat. So if the Pandavas are indeed our enemies, then let us march out to the battlefield and settle this dispute once and for all. Shakuni's lips tightened, and then he smiled slightly. Oh, my dear child, you are powerful but foolish. Why, it seems you must have forgotten Bhima's superhuman strength. And do you not remember the incident at Kampilya? All of the Kaurava princes, with you by their side, could not overpower Drupada. But with only 4 fighting, the Pandavas were successful. So it is unlikely that we will win in a confrontation with those 5 brothers. Now, heed my words. Being reminded of Kampilya, Karna was now embarrassed. He let out an angry shout. For they had been taken by surprise there at Kampilya. Drupada had been stronger than they expected. The Pandavas had the advantage, confronting Drupada after having witnessed his actual power. But next time, if the Pandavas confronted the Kauravas directly, things would be different. Karna shook his head, but before leaving the room he spoke. Do what you will, but I cannot be a party to such cowardice. The cunning Shakuni had carefully assessed the situation. He pressed Duryodhana to approach his father and asked for the Pandavas to be sent away. He knew that Dhritarashtra would not refuse his son anything. Duryodhana nodded slowly. He trusted Shakuni's judgment. Together, they worked out the details of their plan. Then, Duryodhana went to see the king. Dhritarashtra knew well of his son's hatred for the Pandavas. He knew that Yudhishthir's installation as the heir apparent had been a bitter blow to Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra thought about what he could do for his own sons. He had spoken with Shakuni. His brother-in-law, knowing that Dhritarashtra never acted without counsel, had suggested that Dhritarashtra seek advice from Shakuni's Brahmana friend, Kanika. This Brahmana was an expert in statecraft and politics. Shakuni then personally brought Kanika to see the king. Kanika told Dhritarashtra that he should feel no compunction, no regret about rooting out his enemies before they harmed him. If he saw the Pandavas as his enemies, then he should destroy them without hesitation by any means possible. Because they were stronger than his own sons, a direct confrontation would probably fail. Better to employ some devious means. In the meantime, the king should continue to appear as the Pandavas' well-wisher. Then, as soon as an opportunity arose, he should strike. Dhritarashtra thanked Kanika for his advice and then dismissed him. Dhritarashtra sat alone in his chamber for some time. The thought of killing Pandu's sons distressed him. Perhaps there was some other way they could be removed from Hastinapur. While they were present, his own sons would never be happy. Duryodhana complained constantly about his cousins. Now, the monarchy was about to pass back to Pandu's line. Dhritarashtra had enjoyed his opportunity to occupy the throne of Hastinapur as world emperor. Although he was the firstborn son, and thus the first in line for the throne, Dhritarashtra had thought his blindness had forever denied him the chance to be king. But in the years since Pandu's departure, Dhritarashtra had become accustomed to holding the reins of power, and it would not be easy to let go. And as Dhritarashtra sat in his darkened room, Duryodhana came to see him. Dhritarashtra heard his sighs and heavy steps as he approached, and then Duryodhana sat before him. Dhritarashtra gently greeted the prince, asking him what was wrong. "Oh, my dear father, I am hearing ill news throughout the kingdom. The citizens are growing restless. They want you to hand over the throne to the Pandavas as soon as possible. Here is what they are uttering. Why should we have the blind king now that Yudhishthira is grown? The citizens care not for you or for me." Duryodhana stood up sharply and began pacing the room, his gold ornaments jangling. As he strode about, he punched his hand with his clenched fist. "My dear father, soon we shall become dependent upon the Pandavas. They will be the kings, and after them their sons will inherit the throne. Thus, our line will be plunged into misfortune. We shall become powerless and lose the honor that we have long enjoyed. What could be more painful for us? Now, I have been considering how we can be delivered. Listen carefully as I explain my idea." First, Duryodhana suggested that the Pandavas be sent to a distant city. On the pretext of sending them on holiday, they could be sent to Varanavata, where a splendid festival honoring Lord Shiva would soon be celebrated. The town was noted for its attractions. The Pandavas would surely be pleased to visit, and once they had left Hastinapur, perhaps they would never return. Immediately, Dhritarashtra understood what was on his son's mind. But how could he possibly agree? "Oh, my son, my brother Pandu was always devoted to virtue. He did not care for wealth. My pious brother was devoted to me. Why, he gave me everything, including this wide and prosperous kingdom. How could I ever hurt his sons? Besides that, the people love the Pandavas. They will become angry if we sent them away. Perhaps the people would rise up against their leaders, removing them by force. And certainly Bhishma and the other senior Kurus would favor the Pandavas. But Duryodhana was ready for this objection. No, my dear father, we should try to win over the people by various means. Bestowing wealth and honors upon them, why, we will gain their love and trust. Then, in the absence of the Pandavas, it will be possible for me to become king. And once my position is established in Hastinapur, Kunti and her sons could never return. So you should not fear for their welfare. Dhritarashtra sat up, leaning toward his son. Yes, this very thought has been on my mind, but I have not spoken of it because it is a sinful thought. Still, I am doubtful. How do you propose that we deal with Bhishma, Vidura, Drona, and Kripa? Why, they love the Pandavas as if they were their own sons. Duryodhana smiled. As usual, Bhishma will remain neutral. Drona's son, Ashvatthama, is my staunch supporter, and his father will never go against him. Drona has married Kripa's sister. Therefore, Kripa's support is assured. Vidura is the only one we cannot trust. He will certainly side with the Pandavas. But what harm can Vidura alone do to us? My dear father, I implore you, please agree to my proposal. For if the Pandavas are allowed to remain here in Hastinapur, then I will not be able to live anymore. My heart is burning, and I live in constant anxiety. Dhritarashtra was now torn. He sat for some moments sighing. Finally, he gave his assent. Everything lay in the hands of Providence. What could he, a mere mortal, filled with desire and fears, do against all-powerful destiny? The king called his servants and retired for the night. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namaste Narasimhaya, Prahlada Klada Dayane, Hiranya Kashi Puravakshaha, Shiladankana Kalaye, Nrsimha, Parato Nrsimho, Yato Yami Tato Nrsimha. By here Nrsimha, Uday Nrsimha. Nrsimham Adim Sharanam Prapatye. Nrsimham Adim Sharanam Prapatye. Tavatara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadish Jaya Jagadish Jaya Jagadisha Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama